Hey everybody, I just wanted to make this video regarding housing market prices. And it's not like I don't really do too much research in the housing market. I'm not a real estate agent, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't really know too much about housing, but I do know a few things about economics. And so I wanted to give my general view on the average sale price of houses sold in the United States. I noticed that when it comes to a lot of the economic movements in the United States, or even or policies in general, China leads in a lot of things. And I think China leads in more things that we care to admit, whether it be in the action of the stock market, um, the housing market, the financial system, or even social policies and political ideologies. China leads in a lot of these things. And we saw the real estate bubble burst in China. But, with the eventual quantitative easing and efforts made by China, they're in a state of deflationary effects right now. But with that being said, if you just look at the housing market prices, how sustainable are these prices? I would argue, not very sustainable. And I mean, how can it be that in the aggregate, since Q4 2017, or any of these numbers in general, how could it go almost, in some places, they're anywhere from 100 to 400%. How can these home prices sustain these prices or valuations? It doesn't make sense. Um, just purely speaking of economics, I mean, it's like there's not enough supply for housing. Rent prices are too high right now. Mortgage interest rates are way too high. And what was selling for maybe 100,000 1 year, maybe in 2020, 2021, and the beginning of 2022, yes, I understand this correlates a lot with the interest rates, but these home prices that were selling for 100,000 now go for 300,000. That is insane. And some of these are being 400,000. Typically, they're bought by banks and other real estate companies, businesses, and then they're being flipped or sold. But how sustainable is this? And there could be a lot of reasons why. I would only assume why asset management or a bank or a hedge fund, any sort of institution, why they would purchase these assets, and then maybe it could make their balance sheets seem much more stronger than what they are, or maybe it's a way to control the economy in a sense, because in America, despite saying we're capitalists and we're free market, we're really not. Okay, a lot of the things that we do in America, it's like giving the sense of freedom, but then coercing and then shepherding people to act and behave in a certain way. So it's just like that with news, with China. It's like with the whole thing with the balloon or our feelings towards China. It's like rather than have sensible discussion or diplomacy, we just demonize them. So we can. It's easier to assert ourselves as a country in negative ways towards a country if we don't even view them as humans, right? But so, looking at these home prices, how sustainable is this? And it's kind of like eh, it's sort of a big FU on both sides to the buyer who is looking to get in, whether they want to buy a home for their family or whether they want to invest into real estate. But it's also a FU for this, from the seller, because they're basically saying we're basically trading this house. They're trying to make 100, 200% return on their investment on a house that they've only had for a year, two, three, or give or take more. But these prices are unreasonable, and it's actually being reflected in things like the amount of houses sold, amount of time houses are on the housing market, how many houses are just the volume of transactions is just going down. And so I would have to ask, how sustainable is it to have these prices? I would argue not very much, not very much so. And if you just look at the past, I mean, gosh, even just the past 10 years, or even after the '08, I mean, You can't have large run-ups like this and then not expect any kind of pullback. And we're seeing a small pullback, but this pullback we currently see is nothing. So I mean, just looking at year 2020, a lot of these homes in the aggregate are maybe going up, you know, on average maybe around 100%. But what does that mean for like individual properties? How much are these things going up in value? Again, anywhere from 100, sometimes 500% as well. So, how sustainable is this? Is the purchasing power of the average person going up? Are equities and is the stock market going up as well? Do people have the means to purchase these homes, and are their net worths going up? So people's net worths are actually going down. The purchasing power for the average American is going down. Interest rates and the price to borrow money is going up as well. So it's just that these prices are unsustainable. You can't just price everyone can't just like price something really high, make the barrier to entry really high, and then production of these the availability of the supply, this manage it. You can't just say like, okay, we're gonna keep these prices elevated and we're not gonna create any more supply to sustain these high prices. You can't do that, because if you do, eventually something's gonna break, right? Whether it be like the raw material market, the commodity market, the supply of labor, supply chains. Like, these things can't be sustained. Like, you can't just freeze these things. You can't slow down production, because there's a huge negative effect. So eventually there's numerous reasons why these prices have to come down, more so than why they should stay up. Because again, just look at the state of Hawaii, for example. I mean, here's the thing with Hawaii. You have X amount of people, and then you have most people rent, and most people can't buy homes, and most people can barely make ends meet. They have to work 2 jobs or 1 or 2 jobs, just depending on your income and your cost of living expenditures. But generally, you can't take away one of people's Myers-Briggs needs, which is like home, safety, and security. You can't take that away and then expect people to participate in the economy. It doesn't make sense. There's no incentive to play the game anymore. So I would argue that just looking at Hawaii, yes, you can try to manage the people as best as possible. You can manage labor and supply by saying, okay, we'll use like the lower middle class as fuel for the economy. Okay, we'll use their labor to we'll tax them through inflation by reducing their purchasing power, keeping wages stagnant, and increasing their cost of living. That way we can pay off some of our debts, or we can use that to reduce inflation. Okay, that's one way to do it, but how much longer will these people participate in the job market, and what will their production output be? Maybe it'll lower down tremendously, or it'll just become unsustainable in itself. So honestly, this whole thing is just run by greed. If people were less greedy and then we could have a sustainable economy and society, because people would be able to meet their Myers-Briggs needs, and they would be able to have long-term goals that are achievable. But how long are you going to rely on old labor to fuel supply chains and fight inflation? How long can we expect that to work? And then how long can we expect the job market to just yield towards or bend towards the whims of our government and the state and the employing class? How long can we expect that? I would argue that's very unsustainable. So basically what we're doing is that we're disincentivizing people even more from participating in the economy in the way that's structured. So if we want to avoid a collapse in our economy and in our society, We need to lower down cost of living. We need to lower down the purchasing. We need to increase purchasing power, and we need to increase affordability and availability of homes on the market so people can inevitably have cheaper rent, and cheaper access and more affordable access to homes. Because what's the point of playing a game if you can't ever win it? There's no point in playing it, and people are waking up to that. And the shift we see inevitably from the lower to the top and everything in between, it's just a matter of greed. It's everything, narcissism and greed. If we didn't have narcissism and greed, none of these things would happen. But people by nature are narcissistic and greedy unless they're left with checks and balances, and we're not. So I do believe that the government and the Fed, they even inevitably, they will do a good balancing act in order to keep some form of stability, but it'll change, right? They will never meet, it'll never stay at equilibrium. It'll go up and down, but eventually we will meet some point of more sustainability. And this could be the byproduct of just the downturn of an economy, but it's not the same as last time, or 2008, or 2016, or 2020, or any other time prior, because the world is just tremendously different. Our position in the United States is just there. Everything's different. So there's some characteristics that are the same, but it's also not the same. So, in my opinion, if I could sum this all up, everything just seems very unsustainable. So we need to basically, there are winners in society and losers. And there are just way too many losers in this current society. We need to fix that. Whether it be the world, we need to rebalance the world so that there's more winners who will participate in the way the world is structured. Or we need to create more winners in America, because without winners, you can't have a game. Like, you need to let people win once in a while, right? So if there's if there's like a game and there's around 350 million Americans, if enough of them are losing, they'll just quit the game and then the game will break. So you need to make sure that enough people are winning so they want to sustain the economy or the game. A lot of people claim that they want affordable housing for all, or they like these left-winged or socialist ideas or social programs. Okay, and I think that's a great thing and we should be implementing more, but regardless of how I feel, a lot of people who claim to be of a certain political ideology or economic ideology aren't truly aligned with that, because it's like this. Maybe some people want free education for all, or free medical for all, or affordable housing for all, which is this is great and we should be doing something like this to an extent. But if they realize, and they do realize, like, okay, that's going to affect my housing price, like if they buy a house and it's going to make their housing market and net worth go down, they might be against it. So with that being said, I'll have you have a we just can't really have, sometimes you do need interventions, because what people say they want are completely different from what they actually want and will do. So again, these home prices are very unsustainable. The game entirely is unsustainable. There is way too many losers and not enough people winning this game. So yeah, again, if I could just sum this up, I would say we just need more winners, and there's too many losers. Because if you have too many losers and not enough winners, then there's not enough winners to keep the game going. So with that being said, I hope you all have a good day.